it all started with the strength assessment. And to this day, I can tell you that, most of the things I see in the pitching delivery, they are mechanical issues, but they are mechanical issues that stem from a lack of strength, or a lack of mobility.
Welcome to another episode of the Baseball Awakening Podcast, where we dive into the raw, unfiltered, unsexy side of player development. Get ready for some knowledge bombs with your host, Geoff Rottmayer.
Welcome to the Baseball Awakening Podcast. I'm Geoff Rottmayer, and today I'm sitting down with Nunzio Signore, owner and operator of Rockland Peak Performance. And we're going to pick his mind today on assessment, strength training, and some pitching. Nunzio, how are you, sir?
Hey, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. Man, I appreciate you coming on. I know you guys are busy over there, but let's just shoot right into the thing. Let's just start with kind of your background in baseball, man, and how you got started and what you got to doing now.
Well, my background in baseball came from strength and conditioning. After I got out of school at Berkeley College, I was a soccer player. I played baseball probably until the age of 15, and then I never picked up a baseball again. Much like Eric Cressy, he was a tennis player, right. But all through high school and college, I played soccer. And about 12 years ago, I opened up a small facility before RPP, and I trained all athletes. And I started to really feel like there's so much going on with the shoulder that that was a great niche to get into, to really separate yourself from the just, not to put anything against other trainers and sure. Just guys who train all athletes. I mean, that's great. I just wanted to kind of create a niche for myself, and I felt like the shoulder is such, it's such a mobile joint, and there's so many things that can go wrong with it that if you dare step into it, like Eric Cressy did, you could kind of make some ground room for yourself if you're good at it. So I decided to do that, and about 10 years ago, my partner, who is my partner now, Bahram Shirazi, he brought his son in, who was a high-level pitcher at a high school called Don Bosco. And he really loved the systems I had in place. And he said, hey, I think we can work together. And, we implemented pitching mounds, and then we implemented hitting tunnels, and then we implemented 4-camera video analysis, and we'll get into all that. But I'd say about 10 or 11 years ago, I started to train specifically baseball players, pretty much just, exclusively.
Very cool, and I know you guys do awesome work. We can go on your Twitter, see it. You put out good content. You get to go to seminars and all this stuff. So you guys are doing something right over there. Let's kind of talk about. Let's just kind of start with talking a little bit about the strength and conditioning. I want to talk about pitching, but let's talk about the strength and conditioning side, because that's where you got started. I got my CSCS. You were going to ask the question. Good, I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah, no, it's awesome. No. Okay, cool. Yeah. So with that, what do you see? I mean, what do you see with baseball players that it's very different and very similar?
Okay, so from a strength and conditioning standpoint, or from a pitching mechanics standpoint?
We're going to start with strength and conditioning.
All right, so the things that I see the most are, tightness in the lats, lack of upward rotation, pretty gritty internal rotation on the lead hip from landing, guys that have a hard time feeling their glutes, posterior chain strength. A lot of guys come in and they're, the younger, the worse it gets. But I see it everywhere from, the youngest kids we train are 14 years old all the way up into pro guys. I see these issues with most all ages. And it's a lot of guys are quad dominant. They really know how to use the front part of their body. But they really, really are weaker in their hamstrings, glute med, glute min, the things that really help create rotation and, stability. So I'd say the biggest thing I see with guys are, their inability to use their glutes, weak core strength, gritty front hips from a mobility standpoint, really tight lats from working out and training wrong, which makes it hard for them to get overhead, and really poor upward rotation of their scaps, not getting the scapula up high enough to efficiently get overhead safely.
Awesome. So, a word that's getting thrown around a lot that you just mentioned was the quad dominant versus the glute dominant. Can you talk a little bit about that? But the people that are listening that really don't understand, they're seeing the word all over the internet. What does that mean?
Okay, so quad dominant delivery, I guess everyone would have a different explanation of what it is. For me, a quad dominant delivery is when I look at a pitcher and I see that back knee coming over the back toe as they start to load and as they start their initial move forward, all the weight transfer shifts to the front of the leg, which will pull them to their arm side, and they'll a lot of guys will generally land closed because of this. And you can see it from the front, as you can really see that knee. If you view the pitching delivery from the front, you'll see a kid, he'll load, and it's that vertical shin that people say they look for. Basically they're saying a vertical shin, because if your shin is vertical, you more than likely aren't putting the knee over the toe and you're using your glutes. So that's why they look for that vertical shin. A more angled shin towards the toe is going to mean that we are putting too much weight in the front of the leg, generally due to either a back hip mobility issue or a weak core or a weak posterior chain of the back leg issue. And it causes the athlete, especially younger, like 14 to 18-year-olds, before they build up that good amount of strength in their legs, they become very quad dominant and they land closed, and it can make them get overly rotational. It can leave curveballs hanging, makes them cut their ball, all things like that.
Man, there's a lot to that. So, I kind of jumped ahead a little bit. I mean, because I wanted to talk about the delivery. Let's talk about the maybe the assessment when you guys first get guys that come in and do an assessment, because I know you guys are big on the assessment part.
Right. Yeah.
What does that process look like?
Okay, so a pitcher will walk in, or a position player. An athlete will walk into our place, and he's scheduled an assessment. Our assessment takes approximately 2.5 hours. It's long. What he'll first do is he'll fill out a Part Q. We'll check for any previous injury history, and then we will do a gait analysis of him. We'll watch him walk. Then we'll do a static assessment of him and look at how he stands. We'll look at his shoulders and his core in a static standing position. Then we'll have him move into upward rotation. We'll have him bring his arms overhead and see how the scaps move, what his strategy is for his scapular movement. Then we'll check MMT, we'll check strength testing of the cuff, and then we'll lay him on the table and we'll check tightness and flexibility in the upper body. We'll test tightness and flexibility and strength in the lower body, and then we will check his T-spine rotation, his ability to rotate. Then we'll take him off the table. We'll put him onto a jump mat, and we will do a reactive ability test where we check on ground contact times in a jump, in a squat jump or a CMJ jump, and we'll see how our athlete best produces force. Is he using more muscular force, or is it more elastic? And that'll tell us. Say an athlete has a quick ground contact time in his jump. Okay. We know that he's an elastic guy, but if his jump isn't very high, we know we need to focus more on strength. Whereas if he jumps really high, but it takes him a long time to land on the mat and get off the mat, and he has a long contact time, we know that we need to work on his reactive abilities, because it's the combination of how fast, how strong you are, and how fast you produce that strength. So we can control how many plyometrics in his program and the degree of plyometrics he gets from that. And then we'll take him into the weight room and we'll test his force velocity profile using a velocity-based transducer that will tell us how fast he's moving various percentages of his weight in a trap bar deadlift and a squat. And it can tell us how heavy we need to load this person from the start of his program. So that gives us all of his mobility work and all of his strength training and his what phase he will be in his strength training based off of where he is in the season and how he performed on those tests. At that point, we'll have him warm up, and we'll have him throw 5 or 6 from the wind up and stretch in our tunnel off the mound, and we will videotape him and we will check. We'll do a complete video analysis from a four camera shoot that we have. We will also, if the athlete wants to work on pitch design within the next 3-4 months, we will also, if he's able to throw a short pen, we will get Rhapsody numbers on him as well, and we will add a pitch design into his program further down the line of the throwing portion of his program.
Wow. So, man, how did you come up with that? Like, what was kind of the evolution? Like, where did you start? Like, how did you?
Okay. So it all started from strength. I'm a strength and conditioning coach first. I studied kinesiology, and I love movement. I started watching how pitchers move. I started researching the pitching mechanics and pitching delivery, various guys that I really, really respect a lot, such as like Paul Nyman. And I really, I started taking it from there, and I started to develop my own view of what pitching mechanics should look like based off of things that I've read and things that I've studied. And I started implementing it when we implemented tunnels. So it all started with the strength assessment. And to this day, I can tell you that, most of the things I see in the pitching delivery, they are mechanical issues, but they are mechanical issues that stem from a lack of strength, or a lack of mobility, or both. So it started from weight training and the physical assessment and using strength as the foundation for everything. And then we started applying data. We started to see the success with some places like Driveline we're having. Kyle Bodie has been a really great help to me as far as kind of give me some business advice on using data and social media presence. And he's been a really generous guy. I speak with him a lot at seminars like Pitchapalooza. So I started to adapt data and technology as well as strength and conditioning into our assessment.
Very cool. So when I listen to you, and when people listen, the weight room and how you move in the weight room can have a domino effect on how you're moving on the hill.
100%.
And so when people say that, pitchers don't need to lift or they don't need to do heavy stuff, whatever it is, that's a horrible advice.
Horrible. I could tell you right now that when a guy's coming in, maybe a guy has Tommy John surgery and he comes in to rehab and he can't throw for 3 months before his Tommy John before his throwing program starts. These guys get in the weight room. A lot of times, these guys that come to me, they're not always, but there is a lot of times, especially with the younger athletes under 20, there is a definite type that comes in many times, and it's the kid who throws hard, who's thin, and doesn't have a lot of muscle on his body, and he can't disperse that stress. And I'll tell you that a guy will max out at 90 miles an hour or 88, 90, and he gets Tommy John. He comes in, and for 3 months, he can't throw a baseball. So he gets in the weight room, and he works out harder than he's ever worked out in his life because he wants to stay athletic. And he puts on 10 to 12 pounds in 3 months of muscle and girth, and puts on some size. He starts to throw, And by the time he's back up to 80%, 85%, he's already throwing harder than he threw at the peak before he got Tommy John. And he hasn't really thrown hard or changed any mechanics at all. So that tells me that just the gain in lean muscle mass alone has brought his velocity up.
Right. And so, I want to kind of talk, when we look at, let's just start in the pitching motion, when we look at the feet, where does the weight go? I mean, where did it go in the weight room, and then where did it go when you're on the mound? Like the feet, when I'm standing on the rubber, where does my weight go on my feet?
Okay, so if you're talking about its stance, there's stance and during the stride phase where the foot goes. We like to see the weight more evenly distributed over like the whole foot, with the ankle slightly everted as the center of mass comes down the mound. So it kind of brings them and makes them able to drift. I like to try to keep them into the center of mass in and over that foot. And I like to keep that foot as flat as long as possible, to be able to really, when it's time to rotate, to really be able to use the whole foot, to really use those external rotators to drop that leg down really quickly and get maximum rotation as quick as possible by keeping the foot in a nice stable position with its weight evenly distributed. So I like the foot to be evenly distributed as long as possible until we start to put that front leg down.
And what in the weight room, like the squat pattern, that the same way? That how you repeat the feet work there, or what?
Well, that to me is just as much a matter of ankle mobility and hamstring and calf strength and calf mobility, and able to get your evert and invert. That's your ankle going side to side, and dorsiflect, your ankle going front to back. So we check ankle mobility in our assessment, and we do a lot of things to strengthen the ankle, because you can have the strongest glutes and leg as possible, but if you can't stabilize your foot, your weight over your foot with a weak ankle, it's really going to do you no good, and you're going to have a tendency to spin out early on that back leg, and what we call vaulting, where guys kind of are jumping down the mound, and we don't want that.
Yeah. Now, what if you got a guy who, when he lifts his leg low and his back foot turns, like the heel turns in? What is that?
The heel turns in, like his foot goes back towards behind him. It
slides, like the heel goes toward the catcher.
The heel goes towards the catcher. He's spinning out on that back foot. He's obviously not keeping enough weight on that back foot, because if he had enough weight centered on that back foot, it wouldn't spin out, A. Yeah. And B, he may just not have enough rotation in that back hip to actually rotate the femur in the hip, so the leg can turn and keep the hip stable. So that hip has to go. The body's going to go wherever it feels comfortable. So water seeks the quickest course. So if he has a lack of hip mobility, he's not going to be able to keep that hip from turning out. The other thing is, if he has a tight groin as he brings that front leg down, that might also cause him to spin out on that back leg, because the groin's so tight that he actually can't adequately and efficiently use the amount of stride that he's going for. So it'll also pull on that back leg.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that and how the tightness of these muscles and these joints are preventing them? Like for the people that are listening that maybe don't understand how.
Okay, so when I say the groin muscle, I'm talking about the two muscles on the insides of your thighs. Okay, so if you were to do a split and you had tight groins, they're called the adductors. If you had tight adductors, you would not be able to get very far into a split. Your legs would be tight. So think about a split position. In a sense, when someone tries to do a split, that's like what they're trying to do as they open that front leg up and they come down the mound and they try to get that 80% of their body length stride length. Okay. So if you have a tight groin and it's not going to allow you to do a split, you're going to actually come up short when you try to put that front leg down too. So what's going to happen is the body it's not going to let you continue to do it if you don't have that flexibility in the groin. So something's got to give, and it's going to be the back leg is going to get pulled forward because it can't actually do that. And at the same time, if you can't turn your leg inward without moving your whole entire hip, as you try to turn that back leg inward to rotate, you're going to bring your hip around early, and that's something you don't want either. So tightness in those two areas, the hip and in the groin, will definitely create problems when you're trying to keep that back foot down.
That makes sense. So what if somebody says, hey, my solution is just going to be I'm not going to stride as far? My solution is going to be I'm just not going to stride as far because I can't do it. I'm just going to do a shorter stride. I mean, what's the domino effect of that thought process?
Well, if you're not striding as far, if you're in mid-season and it's really affecting your pitching, maybe shortening up your stride might be something to do for a quick fix. But when we have some time to work on a guy in the off season, that would be something. If the guy is striding short because that's as far as he can be with efficient mechanics, that's where he's at. But by striding short, what's happening is you're creating force for a less. You're moving down the mound and you're creating acceleration for and producing force for a shorter period of time. It's almost like if I was in a car and we were going 100 yards from a wall and I could hit the gas. If I was traveling that full 100 yards fast, I would hit the wall a lot harder than if I pushed the pedal to the metal and hit the wall at 40 yards away. So it's really dependent upon how hard you can hit the wall. That wall being how hard your front foot hits the ground and stops the transfer force up the chain. So with a longer stride, we can put more force into the ground when we do land. So we're a little bit, we're a little bit more of an advantage with a longer stride, so we can produce that power and force for a longer period of time. Now, on the other side, we don't want to overstride. We don't want to stride so much that we get into a really bad position with our hips too low that we actually can't get back out and post up. So there's disadvantages to a short stride, and there's disadvantages to overstriding. So each guy has to find out where their ideal stride length is. But one thing for sure is tightnesses in the groin and in the back leg are definitely going to inhibit you finding out where your optimal stride is.
Yeah. Let's talk about the front foot a little bit. So you see it a lot. Just kids just flying open really early with that front leg. What's the pattern with the front leg? What's that doing, and what's the timing of it?
Okay, so I always tell guys we like to start to see the front leg come down towards the ground when the back leg starts to rotate. So when the back leg starts to rotate into internal rotation, we like to see that start to put the front foot down. And as far as the timing is, that is right when they're out pretty much almost at full stride. Then we like to see the foot come kind of straight down. We try to talk about landing like a helicopter instead of a jet. Some guys have a lot of success landing with a heel first landing, but we can get a more abrupt stop if we can land more like a helicopter flat and create a really sudden stop that allows the athlete, if he has the strength to accept that force, to really transfer it up into his core and eventually into his arm. And what we see with the front knee is a lot of times, because of numerous things, that front knee will leak. It will collapse inward or outward, or it will continue to move forward as the athlete tries to post up. And that's a huge energy leak. There's some of the highest correlations to velo are, knee extension after foot strike. So, there's numerous things that can cause that that lack of posting up. You know what I'm talking about, right? Where a guy lands and then you see his body continue to move forward over the knee, and instead of the legs kind of straightening out a bit. Right. It doesn't have to get perfectly straight, but we do want to see a certain amount of degrees that we see that leg post up a little bit. So we know that force is being transferred in a backward manner into that hip that will help that hip rotate, that front hip rotate. So that can be caused by a weak posterior chain in the front leg that doesn't allow the front leg to adequately decelerate, which will create a less than stable landing that'll make it leak. Poor hip IR, that's another thing that can be caused because it doesn't allow the athlete to rotate into front foot plant and continue to rotate and extend that knee to transfer force. And, the timing issues, speeding the upper body up a little faster, like coming around with the upper half a little too quick, will get that athlete with too much of a forward trunk tilt at foot strike. And that's going to put too much more weight than he can handle on that front leg. And that will make it go forward as well. Yeah, man, there's a lot going on there. So what, the front leg, you mentioned it earlier. You said the front leg, you're not actively trying to push that. You're trying to keep rotating, right? Yeah. See, that's a really, really big misunderstanding. Yeah. A lot of times when a new athlete, especially a young one, comes in and they come from another pitching facility, a lot of times we ask them, did your coach ever tell you that you need to post up better? And they'll say, yeah, he did. And they say, how did he show you to do that? And they show us, and they're literally pushing and jerking their front knee backwards. Yeah. Okay. That is the biggest fallacy in creating knee extension and creating a good post up. Because what you're doing is you're creating a negative force going the other way of where you're trying to throw the ball. Okay. So what you want to do is you want to rotate into that front hip. That front hip will straighten out by rotating and extending the hamstring and straightening out the leg. And that's how you adequately transfer force. Because if you kick the knee back, what you'll see is these kids go flying forward like they're on a bicycle that hit a curve. Yeah. And then you see them throwing off one leg. And that back foot comes flying up and they're throwing off one leg. Yeah. And that's because they're throwing that knee back. If they rotate into that front knee, it allows them to keep that back foot on the ground a little longer, and it allows them to get further over their front side to create later ball speed. Yeah. Can you talk about that a little bit, the idea of keeping the back foot on the ground as long as possible? Yeah. So you had asked me a question earlier about triple extension. Do I want to see the knee roll down or triple extend? I kind of want to see both. I like the back leg and back foot should begin to roll over more as the lead leg and the hips begin to open going into contact. But the triple extension happens closer to ball release. And, there's guys that have major success where you look at them and they're throwing off one leg. Does that mean that everybody should do that? No. We can't base pitching mechanics off of a few outliers who happen to throw 95 miles an hour, 100 miles an hour with the back foot off the ground. Right. That is not the norm. Right. So we try to, if you look at a guy like Zach Greinke at ball release, you don't have to have your back foot firmly planted into the ground, nor do you want that. But a lot of times, being able to use that back leg just to touch the ground in triple extension to let you know that it's there can help offset the hips to let you have a little bit more of a stable platform to throw from. So you can actually kind of as much as possible try to repeat that position from throw to throw. Yeah. If you use that back leg like a kickstand, kind of. It kind of like creates a more stable environment on the lower half that you can actually land in the same position every time, as well as it creates a more stable environment for you to actually extend over your front leg and get that arm out closer to the hitter. Yeah. So let's talk about the hip shoulder separation. There's some sayings out there that
it's happening in the hip socket or it's happening in the pelvis. What is the hip shoulder separation, and what should it look like?
Well, hip shoulder separation is different for everybody. Guys that kind of wind up really, really early to try to think that if the further they can counter rotate their torso before they go. I think that guys that do that, I think they're setting themselves up for actually not being able to transfer energy as quickly. The key thing is to create that separation as the hips are moving forward, rotating towards the batter, to really get a good scap load, to create counter rotation of the torso. I think we need to try to think about hip and shoulder separation happening sort of at the same time. So it happens for a short period of time and happens really, really quickly. So that's why we like to emphasize a scap load. You were talking about, is it the hip socket or the core? I think it's a little bit of both, Yeah. The hips, the hips and the anterior core, they connect the pelvis from top to bottom. So there's kind of like a battle right there for flexion, extension going on between the hips and the core. And you really need good mobility and strength in both. But how you create your hip and shoulder separation and when you create it is key. Guys that are really, really tall, a 6'5" guy who has a really long torso, he actually might need to open up those hips earlier so he can get much, much more of a stretch, because he has a lot further to go in his core to really create that tension. Whereas a short guy like a Marcus Stroman, a shorter athlete, if he tries to open up his front hip too early, he doesn't have as long of a torso. So what's going to happen is he's going to run out of room really quickly, and that's going to pull him around prematurely. So he needs to try to keep that front leg internally rotated for a little bit longer of a period of time. Whereas a guy like Chris Sale or Kershaw, you can see these guys, they kind of open up really early. And it's because they have big, long torsos. So they have to open up the front leg early so they need more time to stretch that big, long core. As a guy like Stroman, they got to keep it, internally rotated. So it's different strokes for different folks. There is no set way or set of mechanics that work for everyone, especially when it comes to stretching the fascial system in the core and getting hip and shoulder separation. So you got to kind of see, once again, you got to play with timing of your scap load and your hips to see what's lighting the gun up the most.
Yeah. What with the guy that goes down that hill and he's he's rotating way too soon, hip and shoulder both all together, no separation at all. What's going on there? That you see that a lot with kids.
That's a lot with kids, and the reason that's a lot with kids is because that is with younger athletes. That's a strength issue. That's a strength issue. Their core is probably, if they are scap loading fairly well and they are rotating pretty well in the lower half, that's a core issue. That's an anti-rotation issue. So the core has to be able to turn quickly, but it also has to be able to resist turning as well. Okay. And there's exercises we do with cables, like cable chops and lifts and pull-off presses, things we do in the weight room that make an athlete be able to hold. So when that upper body is turning towards second base and that his hips are turning towards the hitter, we need to be able to hold that core in place until we're ready to let it go. And that's a strength issue. And when kids, when kids have a weak lower half, they have a tendency to want to muscle the ball and get all of their velocity from their upper body because they don't have any in the lower half. And it makes them throw with all arm. And that's going to make the top side, the thorax, the torso go first.
Yeah. And then they pull that front shoulder and all that, or front arm, and all that whole stuff happens.
Yeah, and they don't, we didn't even talk about glove side. So assisting in rotation on the glove side is key. That helps unwind. That will help two things. One, that'll really help unwind rotation when it is time to rotate, so you don't have to get it all with the arm side. And also, it helps throw the arm back into layback as the arm is laying back first. So we want to sync up our arms so our pull is kind of pulling as the arm goes into layback.
So you want the front arm to pull down?
I want the arm. I want the front arm down. I don't know is the right word. I like the arm to pull to retract. I like the scap to retract on the glove side, just like it retracts on the throwing side. And pretty much almost at the same time. Because as the back arm retracts, right after that, the glove side retracts, and it kind of helps throw the arm into layback. Some guys wait too long with their glove side, and some guys go way too early. And that's another thing that kills rotation a lot of times. If they pull that glove side too early, before the arm starts to lay back, they're pulling their front side around.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know there's strength issues there, but they're like anything you tell a guy that, hey, you're trying to rotate way too soon on top half with that front arm rotating way too soon, pulling way too soon.
The glove side?
Yeah, the glove side. Yeah.
We try to tell them to keep the glove side thumbs down.
Down.
Once we coach thumbs down, it helps keep that front shoulder a little bit more closed. Okay. And then when they get into landing, we tell them at landing you want to start to pull that glove side as you go into layback.
What's the timing of you hear about timing of the back arm? What is that? What does that mean? Trying to picture the timing of the back arm.
I think the timing is the path that the arm takes, going into front foot contact. Timing from the handbrake coming out of the glove, to the position of arm at contact. The path it takes, will get it into a better position in contact. So we need to make sure we're getting good retraction of the scap. How are we pulling the arm up? Is the athlete using a long arm? Is he using a short arm? Not that one is better than the other, but a long arm path. We have to make sure that we're pronating enough to get into a good load. If not, we're gonna have a hard time with scapular retraction. And if we have a close arm, we need to make sure we're supinating, turning the thumb out a little bit as we come back. So the timing is from handbrake to how we actually bring our arm up, and how we actually the elbow moves in kind of a circular motion or a spiraling into layback, and then into the acceleration phase where the arm comes forward. So the timing, what we talk about timing, is basically from the hands at handbrake until where the arm is at foot plant.
Huh. So what about a kid that's pushing? What's he doing? Is he not getting that spiral, or what's happening there?
Generally, he's getting his elbow too high, too early.
Too high.
And then he has to get it, or too low. Because what happens is, if it's a low elbow, he's got to get that arm up and into layback quickly, and he's going to take the shortest path he can, and it's going to force him to come forward with that elbow, or come down and forward with that elbow if he's getting that elbow up too high. He has it, so we got to make sure that the elbow is coming back into retraction, and it's not getting above the shoulder as he throws, because that's going to create a push.
Huh. That's a tough one to fix, is it?
A lot of things, habits are tough to fix.
Right.
I have found the hardest thing to fix is that post up. For me, that's always hard, because it's happening at such a fast pace. I have found the easiest thing to fix is back leg mechanics, coming down the mound, loading the glute, because it's the first thing that happens, and it happens at the slowest pace. So it's the easiest thing to see. It's the easiest thing to feel. Trying to post up when your foot hits is ridiculous.
Yeah. So do you use any of the devices out there, like the Velo Pro?
I use the core velocity belt.
Yeah.
We use the core velocity belt. Other than that, other than weighted balls and a core velocity belt, I really don't think we use any what I would call gadgets. I love the core velocity belt, though. We use it a lot, and we use it for multiple things, and it's a great tool.
Cool. So if I'm watching a video right now of a kid throwing, what am I watching? What's kind of, I know there's, you you want to look at everything. But if I had to look at it, if I'm a young coach trying to figure things out, and I'm watching this video of a kid, what am I watching? What am I trying to focus on the most that really help the kid out? Other than,
there's so many things, but
yeah.
I could tell you that maybe the big five I look at.
Okay.
How is he loading that back leg at lead leg lift, at peak leg lift? How is he loading the back leg? Okay, it's going to tell us how things are going to start to transpire later. So number one, how is he loading that back leg? Number two, does he start drifting forward down the mound before he starts to push? I think I want to see that body start to, center of mass start to move down the mound before he begins pushing with his back foot. Okay, it's almost like a controlled fall. That's number two. Number three, is he going to scap load? What is his hand path coming up into his scap load? Does he have a close arm or does he have a distant arm away from his body? That will tell us what type of mechanics he needs to use as far as pronation or supination. So that's number three. So we have loading the leg at peak leg lift. Then we have, does he drift? Number three, how is he bringing his arm up into scapular retraction? Number four, where is the arm at foot strike? And five, there's so many others, but five, how is he finishing? How much extension is he getting in that lead leg to transfer force up? And is he getting out over that front leg?
Yeah, no, I mean, I like to ask that question because, there's a lot of young guys out there that are listening that want to kind of start the process of watching video, and they just have a hard time. I remember trying to learn, what do I look at? That's why I kind of asked that question.
Yeah, and, once you know what to look at, then you have to know, okay, I know that that's not right.
Yeah.
So now you have to know, how do I fix it?
Yeah.
Well, how you fix it is dependent upon why it's happening. If it's a purely mechanical issue, you can do it with throwing drills. If it's a strength or mobility issue, you have to go back to the egg and you have to get into that weight room. And I will tell you that at least half the time, it is a strength or mobility issue.
Yeah. So, what about injuries? The injury of the elbow versus the injury of the shoulder. Is there certain things that create one over the other?
That's a good question. Most of the pitchers that we deal with, they throw pretty hard. With younger kids, I find that there's more shoulder issues. With older guys who are throwing a little harder, where rapid elbow extension is happening, I find that that's when we start to see medial elbow, posterior elbow, things like that start to come into play. That's where we'll start to see guys complaining about their elbow. Younger kids mostly complain about their shoulder, unless, they're throwing too much and they throw hard for their age. Then they do start to complain about the elbow. So there's all kinds of different,
right.
things
right.
that cause it. So, but rapid elbow extension is one. As far as shoulder issues go, it could be anything from how they're throwing or are they throwing too much. And another thing is, even in our throwing programs, when throwing starts to ramp up to about 75 to 80% in the off season, and they're throwing for the first time really hard since they've been throwing in July or August, guys will get sore. So it's really important to not confuse, soreness and tightness with pain.
Yeah.
So with injury, a lot of times people get paranoid and they're like, oh my God, and they run to a PT and the PT will shut them down.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they think it was the right thing to do because the pain goes away. Well, if you really weren't hurt and your tissue was just trying to, acclimate to the stress of throwing, well, now you've stopped it and your tightness went away. But all you really did was you have to start over again. And these are the kids that go in and out of the PT, in and out of the PT. Now, I'm not knocking PTs because they're extremely valuable. And when there is pain and when there is trauma, you absolutely need to shut down and you need to go see one. But running to a PT the first minute your arm feels tight is, that can really create a kid who's a hypochondriac. That arm has to get used to throwing. And I'll tell you, 2 weeks into it, the tightness subsides and their arm doesn't bother them anymore. Yeah. Most of the time. Right. If it continues, then it's time to see a PT. Right.
So the band stuff, like the band and the plyo stuff and the weightlifting, what the good protocol for arm care, and then there's stuff think it's doing too much.
Well, arm care is full body training. Yeah. So thinking about arm care as just being band drills and arm circles, that's not going to get you very far, because if you don't take care of the mobility of your hip, your arm's going to hurt. Yeah. If you don't take care of the rotational abilities of your core, your arm is going to hurt. So arm care is full body care. The things we do in the off season to try to work on arm care is we try to increase shoulder IR that may have gotten lost over a long season of throwing. We actually give external rotation a break. We want, from being in layback all season. We try to improve the mobility of the hips. We try to, and we get the whole body stronger. And then as far as band work goes, we give our guys 4 or 5 drills to do, about 15 reps a piece, one set every time they come in. And it takes about 5 minutes, because the really important thing you have to understand is, A, you got to make sure you're doing your band work properly, or you're doing more harm than good. And the other thing is, if you're doing too much band work, you're putting your arm in like the 3rd inning before you even throw a pitch. Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of guys sit there and do hundreds of reps at the field, and then they'll get on the mound, and they look good in the 1st inning because their arm's really in the 3rd inning, and then by the 3rd inning they're shot. Yeah.
So and that's where kind of getting guys to know themselves, because some guys need less, some guys need more, some guys need nothing. It's just knowing themselves, and that's the hard part, right?
Yes. Knowing, and also going to a facility that can help kids figure out what type of individual they are and who needs band work and who doesn't, who needs to stretch their hamstrings, who needs soft tissue work. Some guys need to stretch, some guys need to strengthen, some guys just need to do soft tissue work. You know what I mean? So figuring out a type of guy who needs more band work than somebody else, or figuring out a guy who needs more stretching. A lot of our guys stretch very little. Yeah. They do a lot of soft tissue work, but they stretch very little. Baseball players, for the most part, a lot of them, especially pitchers, are very loose guys to begin with. So stretching an already really mobile joint can be a recipe for disaster.
Interesting. So for the guys to say that velocity can't be developed, what do you say?
I say that that's false. Yeah. We do it every day. Yeah. Every day. I think that velocity gets developed in different people in different ways. Some guys, it might be a strength issue. Some guys, it might be a mobility issue. Some guys, it might be the mechanics. Some guys, it might be a little bit of both. Some guys are really strong, but just don't produce force really quickly. Those guys need to move faster. Some guys, that's why when I told you the beginning of our assessment, and it covered all those different parameters, it's because we need to test everything and find out what shakes free. And then that helps us develop the program that we need to do for our athletes. We could figure out, is it a strength? Is it mobility? What does this kid need? Does this kid need to stretch? Is he having a hard time in layback? Does he have a bad glove size? These are all things that we need to take into consideration so we can put it into his throwing program and his strength training program. And we try to do it all under one roof so it's easy to contain. Yeah.
What is that? How long did a training session, for you to kind of work on everything and improve things, how long are your guys' training session?
In our pitching program with the high school kids, they come in twice a week to throw. They start with a ramp up. Then they go into like high velocity throws, pull downs. Then we get them up on the mound and we start their pens. We're trying to get them ready to throw in March. That is an hour session twice a week. And then for the young kids, immediately after those 2 sessions, they go into the weight room and they have a lifting program. For the older guys who lift on their own, they generally come 4 or 5 times a week to lift. 2 the days they throw, and 4 days they lift. And on the days they throw and lift, they're here for about 2 hours and 15 minutes, 2.5 hours.
Cool.
The days they just lift, or they're here for an hour and a half.
Very cool. So, I know you guys, I know Bahram kind of mainly dealt with the tech side of it. But what all do you guys do? I know you guys do some of the biomechanics stuff. You got the ref photo. What all do you guys?
Bahram doesn't really deal with the tech side of it. He deals with a lot of the pitch design, the Rhapsody reading. I deal with the tech side. Like, what do we do tech wise? We have we utilize K-Motion and K-Vest for our hitters. Yeah. We utilize hit tracks. We utilize Rhapsody for our hitters in the tunnel. And we read kinematic sequences on our hitters, and we use Blast. In the tunnel, in the throwing tunnel, we utilize four camera video analysis, and we also are right now in the process of bringing in motion capture, which we're really, really excited about, cool. Where we'll get 3D imaging off of via 10 cameras.
Nice. Very cool.
Then we'll really be able to get angular velocities and everything. That's really, for me, I can't wait for that.
That's awesome, man. All right. Well, listen, just to kind of wrap things up, I'd like to ask a few more questions. What are some of your resources? Like, are you a big reader? What are your favorite resources or books, stuff like that?
I am a huge reader. I read every day a lot. So much so that my wife and my kid are like, Dad, you're always reading. You're always reading. Yeah. My resources are anybody that I feel like doing anything good. Some of my resources aren't even from people that are in the training business or in the baseball business, you know. Yeah. Sometimes it's stuff about how self-help stuff. But as far as my resources in baseball, they span from friends of mine like, Eugene Bleeker and Stephen Osterer and Eric Cressy to guys like that run the business side of things like Kyle Bodie, and the data side of things like Jim Beadle from KVS or the guys from Rhapsody. Those guys, they're my go-to guys for when that I read things that they put out. I would have to say, from a strength and conditioning standpoint, Eric Cressy has been the biggest inspiration in my career as far as training baseball players. Every time I see him, I make sure I tell him too. So,
very cool. So, one last question: if you were me interviewing yourself, what would you have asked that I didn't ask?
I would have asked, what is the difference between off-season training and in-season training?
Let's do it.
Okay. In off-season training, we're trying to make changes, strength-wise and mobility-wise, that will affect mechanics. We don't worry about them getting sore because they're not playing baseball. So we work on mobility and we work on changing mechanics and we work on getting them really strong by lifting heavy weight most of the off season. In the in-season, we're trying to take all that strength that we developed in the off season. And now for me, there's many different takes on it. But for me, I try to only train the things in an in-season program that go away quickly. The things that go away quickly are speed, accelerative strength, and explosiveness. They can start to go away within a week to 10 days. Okay? Maximum strength does not go away for approximately 4 weeks before you start to see a decline in max strength or aerobic capacity. So I don't worry too much about getting heavy lifts in with my guys because A, it's not going away. B, I'm really just trying to maintain that strength in season so they don't get what we consider a controlled fall, where they don't get weaker as the season goes on. We're not trying to get them any stronger. We already did that in the off season.
Right.
We're trying to keep them to finish as strong as they started. We're trying to keep that IR good. We're trying to keep their velocity up. We're trying to keep, if guys start to get weak and lose their legs, generally the first thing that goes is their location. They start to throw high. They start to lose velo. Then they start to try to get it with their arms. Then their arm starts to hurt. So we're trying to maintain strength in season by doing lower percentage of 1 rep maxes. And we're trying to get our arm care in. They're 45-minute lifts as opposed to an hour and 15 in the off season. And we're not trying to make drastic changes. We're trying to keep their athleticism and their explosiveness intact.
Cool. So what's the conversation like with parents and coaches that say there's no time in the in-season to work out?
There's no time in the in-season to not work out.
Yeah.
If we're not talking about, I understand. I have a kid, you have a kid, they play a sport, they have to go to school. That's the most important thing. And they've got a life. So, we don't expect guys to get in more than 2 to 3 times a week. With the young kids, I tell them, get in here once or twice a week so we can clean up those things that start to dissipate within a week. If I see you once or twice a week, book one on the weekend and book one on a school night. So you're only coming in 1 night a week on a school night. That's it.
Yeah.
1 night a week. And 1 weekend, and you're going to be good. I'm not asking you to come in 5 days a week and put in, 7 hours of work in a week. I'm expecting you to put in 2 hours of work a week. That's it. So the conversation with the parents is, if you want your son to not start the summer back where he was in September when he started the off season, you need to keep him where he was in February after we got him strong, so we can start at that level of strength and mobility in the summer, and we can keep increasing it in a stepwise manner.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And they're the world is getting more educated into the importance of training in season. People realize that, do baseball players stop lifting once they start playing baseball? Definitely not.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Well, all right, man. Shoot. This was awesome.
That was a good one.
That was a good one, man. You threw a lot out there, and I learned a lot. So I appreciate it. I don't want to take up too more of your time, but I really do appreciate it. I learned a lot. So
I want to say if people want to, go into our Twitter, RPP_performance or Nunzio, at Nunzio Signore, NunzioSignore, and go look on our website, RocklandPeakPerformance.com.
Yeah, no, I agree. They put out great content. I think everybody should check them out for sure. Well, all right, Nunzio. I'm sorry, the name Nunzio. Yeah.
You got it.
All right, cool.
All
right, well, I appreciate your time and thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Okay, bro.
All right.
Bye-bye.
I'll see you.